I'm making a video game. Reiterate has been out in the wild for a week now, and my ego is subsequently 6 feet underground. Thankfully, I am reasonably okay at taking criticism and assessing feedback, and I thought it might be useful to give you my 6 top tips on how to be just as okay as I am. So, let's talk game design. So the alpha build came out and it went a bit like this.
Started making it, had a breakdown. Bon appetit.
And that is, believe it or not, a good thing. I got immediate feedback from a lot of very passionate, enthusiastic and helpful people, and all of that feedback was worth it. Some of it was worded very bluntly, which made certain other members of my community a little bit worried that I was getting torn apart. But you don't get to be 34 years old and publicly have Shadow the Hedgehog as your favourite Sonic character on the internet without developing a pretty thick skin, so I was fine. Which leads us neatly into tip number 1. Criticism of your game is not criticism of you. One of the most unhealthy things that you can do as a creator of anything, not just video games, is to tie your own sense of self-worth to the critical reception of your creations. There are many reasons why something you've made might not gel with somebody else, and a lot of those reasons don't require you to have done anything wrong at all. I'm sure we can all think of a game that has a strong critical reception, that your friends and peers have told you is amazing and you have to play it, and then when you do, you just don't get it. Now imagine that the creator of that game is hanging on your every word and wants to know your opinion specifically. And when you tell them that it's just not for you, they collapse to their knees and break down into a flood of tears. That would be pretty silly, wouldn't it? So make sure that you're not doing the same thing. I'm not saying that this is easy, by the way. I still occasionally take it personally when someone doesn't like something I've done, but that usually goes away once I remind myself I'm brilliant and binge eat a box full of cinnamon rolls, which is a perfectly healthy coping mechanism. It's called self-care, look it up. It's even harder when you've got dozens of people all pointing out the same flaws, although you can actually turn this to your advantage. Which brings us to tip number 2. If 1,000 people tell you that you're dead, you lie down. Later on, I'll talk a bit about when and why you might want to take a stand, plant your flag in the ground and pick a hill to die on. But this isn't that time. If you've got a feature or a mechanic that you put in because you thought it sounded cool, or a way of doing things that you've done just because that's how you've always done it, and then 20 people all show up telling you that they don't like it, don't get defensive. I'll give you an example. For reasons that I can't quite pinpoint, that I think has something to do with playing old DOS platformers like Commander Keen, I've always thought that Shift was a viable, standard, normal jump button that everybody used. Ladies and gentlemen, I have never been more wrong in my life, and I was gently and politely informed of this by basically everybody. Now, I could have taken a defensive stance, told everyone to get used to it and that they'd adjust, dug my heels in and changed absolutely nothing. But here's the thing, it didn't cost me anything to make this change, and it didn't really matter to me. If an overwhelming number of people tell you that something is wrong with your game, even if you believe it's not, then you should at least examine what impact changing that thing would have on your game and your workflow. If it's going to take 400 labour hours to re-implement and fundamentally changes the genre of the game you're making, then sure, maybe it's time for a gentle chat with your audience, and some clearer messaging about what it is they're meant to be doing. But if it's something as simple as changing a default button, what do you lose by doing it? Especially compared to what you'll gain by accommodating a huge number of people, even if you disagree. Like I said, if 1,000 people tell you that you're dead, you lie down. But you do have to be careful when listening to your audience, because tip 3 is make sure that you don't end up designing someone else's game. Bit of a tangent, I write books, novels in fact, but nothing that you can actually go and buy because I haven't published anything yet for reasons that are too convoluted to put into a video about game design. One of the things you learn as a writer that can be applied to absolutely every creative medium on earth is that sometimes people aren't actually telling you what you should do, they're telling you what they would do. And what you have to remember is, they're not the ones making the thing. Once you learn to identify this kind of critique, you'll realise how common it is. Someone says something that they don't like. Let's say, for the sake of argument, it's a piece of level design. They don't like it, they think it's too narrow or too confusing or too easy. Now this part is valid and useful feedback to you. They then go on to tell you how you could fix it. But what they're actually telling you now is how they would fix it. And out of their mouth comes an idea that they'd put into their own game, if only they ever got around to actually making it. Now, they're most likely not doing this on purpose. I don't think we do as people. In fact, I think I do this all the time myself. I think it comes from a good place, where we think we've identified a problem, and because we want to help, we move to a perceived solution that makes sense to us. But if the person making the thing didn't ask you for this, it can actually be counterproductive, because now you, as the creator, are thinking about someone else's vision for the thing that you're making, which isn't really what you want. Now, this is different, of course, to asking someone whose opinion and expertise you value to help you with a specific problem. That can be incredibly useful, and if you've got those people available, you should definitely use them. I know that I do. Especially if they know what they're talking about, because tip number 4, not all feedback is equally valid. This one comes with a big old asterisk so that you don't get mad at me. Part of taking feedback is knowing what it is specifically that you want feedback on. You'll know this thanks to a point we'll get to in a minute, but once you do know what you want feedback on, there are inevitably going to be people who have more useful critique on that point than others. Let's say I wanted to know if my player movement felt good or not, and I have 2 people offering feedback. One of them only buys FIFA and Call of Duty every year, plays nothing else, and spends most of their time arguing on Twitter that the PlayStation 5 is actually the most powerful machine ever built, despite not being able to buy one yet because they're out of stock everywhere. The other one is a speedrunner who holds the world record in both Super Meat Boy and Celeste, and has also made a series of successful 2D Sonic the Hedgehog fan games in Construct 3, which is the engine I'm using. You can see where I'm going with this, but here comes the big old asterisk. This is not to say that that first person has invalid feedback, just that it's maybe not worth as much to you in this situation. Because imagine if that first person, by some miracle, plays your game and comes back to you saying, "Hey bruh, I thought that was really pog, fam, and I'd like to buy it when it comes out." In it, you now have feedback that's valuable for a different reason, because you've clearly done something in your design that appeals to an audience you probably never thought you could reach, and that's definitely worth investigating, but it's still not much use for your original point. So when you're taking feedback, try as hard as you can to look at the background, tastes and experience of the people that are giving it, so that you know what they're really telling you and how much their opinion ultimately matters to what it is you're trying to do. Just to reiterate, this isn't being dismissive of people's opinions. Everybody's opinion is valid, it's just that some are more valid than others based on what you want to get out of the experience. Speaking of what you want, tip number 5. Remember what you're making. This, again, isn't specific to video games and applies to basically anything creative ever. A long time ago, I did an episode on what my game was about. We discussed intent and how important it is to have a vision and an idea of what you want your game to accomplish before you start designing or working on it, so that you can move in that general direction with all of your meaningful choices and decisions. It was a good video, you should go and watch it. Now, that can change during development, and you should always stay open to the idea that what you thought was the fun, engaging part of your game actually isn't, and that there's something else you should be doing instead. Feedback can absolutely help you to identify this, but generally speaking, you want to keep in mind what you started to make in the first place. You want to feed all of the critique you receive through a kind of vision filter, and see whether or not what you're being told aligns with what you want your game to be. I worried about this a lot. Like I said, I was getting hammered like I'd just released Cyberpunk 2077 on the Atari Jaguar, and I was worried I might have completely missed the mark of what I'd initially wanted Reiterate to accomplish. Then I saw this video posted in the Discord by valued community member Killing Love, demonstrating a speedrun of the demo in less than 3 minutes, and all of my worries went away. What I saw here was a flowing, elegant, impressive looking game that, in motion when played well, looked phenomenal. That was what I'd wanted all along, a game with an almost liquidic, fluid flow to it, and here it was, being shown off exactly as I'd seen it in my imagination. There are certain bits of feedback that I've received, things that some people don't like, that if I changed them, wouldn't allow this to happen. You might notice that there's a lot of free space in the levels, where you can just double jump over a lot of the obstacles in your way and dash to the goal in seconds. Some people don't like this, but I do, because not only have I come to realise that some players actually don't play that way at first and have to sort of figure out what they're capable of, it's also apparent that this level of freedom is what allows for speedruns and high level play to look so satisfying and tasty. Now obviously I can't do that for every level. At some point I will have to start designing with a little bit more structure and blocking off certain paths, or else the game might as well be an auto runner with some death pits in. But at the basic level, the movement to me is correct. Some people have said it's too slippery and too floaty, but I'm making the decision to say yes, it is. And I'm leaving it that way because that's what I want it to do. Remember earlier on, I said there'd be certain things that maybe you'd want to plant yourself in the ground and not budge on? This is one of those things. And it's because that slippery, floaty, freeform movement is what gives Reiterate its identity and forms the basis for what I wanted the game to be. Something that flows from leap to leap like a river running down a mountain. Inevitably, this might put some people off, Any decision you make, if you stick to it, will deter some people from liking the thing you've done. Believe it or not only is that okay, it's actually also desirable. Because, tip number 6, you can't and shouldn't please everyone. Remember earlier on, when I brought up our fictional friend who only plays Call of Duty and FIFA, and said that if he liked the game it'd be a pleasant surprise that's worth investigating? Let's go with the more likely reality of that little thought experiment. He most likely wouldn't like Reiterate. Now, if I was to try and change the game so that he did like it, what would that even look like? It certainly wouldn't be the game that it is, or the game that I want it to be. And as you're taking in your feedback and critique, you need to keep this in mind. Not everybody is going to like your game, even if you design and iterate and reiterate on it for the next 10 years of your life. You're chasing an impossibility. I said near the start of the video, some games just don't gel with people. My own personal example is the Fire Emblem series, and I think the entire strategy RPG genre. I've tried numerous times to get into it and I just can't. Something about it just bores me to death and I want to stop playing after about an hour, no matter which one I'm on. Now, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with Fire Emblem, and I wish that I did like it, because then I wouldn't feel alienated by about half the roster of Smash Brothers. But for whatever reason, it's just not something that makes my brain make the happy chemical. And not only am I okay with that, but I would also never ask Nintendo to try and make Fire Emblem for me, because in doing so they'd have to change a whole bunch of stuff that long-time fans of the series have come to like about it, and I imagine there'd still be enough of whatever it is that I don't like to keep me away. So what they'd actually do is end up pleasing absolutely nobody. If you try and please everyone with anything that you're creating, that will involve removing anything contentious or that puts off even a single person, and that will result in you making something that is inoffensive, unchallenging and bland. Basically beige, but as a creative output. And I've often said before that being a bad game isn't the worst thing that a game can be, because a bad game can still take risks or try new things that might be interesting, even if they don't work. The worst thing that a game can be to me is boring, and when you're trying to please everyone, that's where you'll end up. So don't do it. Take a risk, take a stand and make something that fits your vision, even if some people don't like it. You don't need to be liked anyway. If you liked this video, please like this video and subscribe for more videos like the video you liked. Reiterate's alpha demo has gone through some pretty sweeping changes since last week, so if you'd like to play it, even if you played it after the last video, head to the link in the description and then swing by our Discord to join the chorus of people yelling at me for thinking shift was a jump button. And I'll see you the next time I'm thinking, hey, let's talk game design.